Welcome to another episode of The Catholic View for Women, where we give you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. Hi, I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana, my co-hosts here on The Catholic View. How many times have you thought about maybe your previous life when you were Catholic in name only, or maybe you know someone in your life right now, family, circle of friends, that's also Catholic in name only? Well, we've been there and done that, bought the t-shirt. I even wrote a book about it called Beyond Sunday, Becoming a 24/7 Catholic, and that's what we're going to talk about on this edition of The Catholic View for Women. Catholic in name only, what does the research say, and what can we do to change that if we're struggling with that maybe in our family?
Well, and of course, I was Catholic in
Me
name
too.
only for a while, like
Yep.
you, Teresa, like practically over 2 decades of that. You know, cradle Catholic, but thumbed my nose at the church, didn't go to church, and eventually got the sense banged into my head and came back and have been back ever since. But very interesting, in December of 2017, Pew Research Center did a survey. Of course, they released the results in 2018. And I think we want to analyze some of these questions, and you'll be surprised at some of the questions and the results. So first of all, what they did was they interviewed people who, you know, attend church somewhat, and they said, think now about your attendance at religious services, okay? And they asked them, people who attend religious service either every Sunday or at least twice a month. That's the parameter. That's, yes.
So these are the people they questioned, once a week or twice a month?
Once a week or at least twice a month. So they had to be in that category in order to participate in the survey. So the first question was, people who attend religious service, they attend them for many reasons. How important, if at all, is each of the following reasons for why you personally attend religious services? Okay. Number one, to become closer to God. 81% said very important. To be part of a community of faith. 57% said very important. To continue my family's religious traditions. 37% said very important. To meet new people or to socialize. 19% said very important. Because I feel a religious obligation to go to the service. 31% said very important. So what I find, which you guys can all comment on, most striking is, as Catholics, most time they think, oh, we're going because if we don't go, it's a mortal sin, right? I mean, everyone thinks that's the driving reason.
Right, that's the main reason, yeah.
Only 31% said that was the driving reason. In fact, 81% said to become closer to God.
So it's that desire to become closer to God, to seek out, to answer the spiritual questions, depending on the things that we are having in our lives right now. But there's this spiritual desire. We really don't go to church because God needs us to be there. God doesn't need us.
Right.
We need to be there ourselves for our, of course, to worship and praise the Lord and to get the spiritual. But the most important part is to get that spiritual feeding, nurturing that we don't get anywhere else.
That's right.
I wish there were a little bit higher figures, though, for those who were concerned about it being a mortal sin, because so many people don't realize, or for whatever reason, some Catholics shrug it off and say, well, we don't teach that anymore, that it's a mortal sin if you miss Mass on Sunday. There's still an obligation to get to Mass once a week. And unless you are ill or if there's no Mass available where you're at, those are the only two reasons, or obviously if there's an emergency, those are the only reasons you cannot attend Mass. So where we got this idea that it's not a mortal sin is beyond me, because if you just purposely say, I don't feel like getting out of bed this morning, that's cannot do that. That's a sin. It's still a mortal sin.
And then, you know, the other part I like here is it says to be part of a community of faith, because the people who don't go to church, sometimes what they'll say is, oh, that's okay. I don't have to go to church. I don't have to go to Mass because I talk to God at home. I pray at home. And yet, 57%, more than half of the people said no, they go to church to be part of a community of faith.
Right.
So the fact, being with others and worshiping together is still an important factor, isn't it?
And the encouragement that we need
from
each other.
Right.
It is at church that we can speak at a common level. It's like, I have this suffering in my life, or please help me pray for my relative who is very sick, or I just found out about this problem in my life this week. Please join me in prayer. And so the exercise of that spiritual exercise goes beyond Sunday, literally.
Right, exactly. And you know, it reminds me too, I forget who said this, but you know, at Mass we sing so much. We do a lot of singing. And someone once said to me, well, don't you realize, Janet, that singing is like praying twice to God.
Right. Well, that's St.
Just
Augustine
singing.
said that, to sing
Saint
is to
Augustine.
pray twice. Yeah.
Singing, so therefore that also answers his thought to be part of the faith community. Well, most people are not going to sit at home singing to God if they're praying at home, but you show up at church or church services at Mass, you're now enjoying and singing.
What I don't understand is that these numbers are a little bit more encouraging than we would think, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
on the one hand. But on the other hand, we all know, because we see it every single day, and that's the reason I wrote my book Beyond Sunday, we all know so many people, as we did, Janet, and even when we started going back to Mass, we were still creating our own version of Catholicism.
Right. Well, what they call the cafeteria Catholics.
Right.
They pick and choose.
So there's kind of a little bit of a dichotomy or a contrast there, where they're still going, they seek God.
Right.
But on the other hand, they still want to make up their own rules.
Well, again, this survey did not address that. This survey is really focusing in on the whys about the attendance. You know, the other part, as you said, their level of knowing their faith, understanding their faith, that would have to be another whole, maybe they'll do another survey next year delving into that. But anyway, here's another question. Again, they asked the same respondents who attend religious services at least once or twice a month or more often the following question. And now still thinking about why you attend religious services. How important, if at all, is each of the following reasons for why you personally attend those services? Okay. Number one, for comfort in troubled times and sorrow, 66% said it's very important.
That's pretty high.
That's pretty high, and that rings true after September 11th. The churches were jam-packed for at least the next month. Sadly, but the second month after it started to decline again.
We experience the same thing in Costa Rica when we have a very strong earthquakes and following aftershocks. It's about a month that churches are jam-packed, and then it starts dwindling down.
Dwindling down again. But yet, more than half of the people say, in troubled times, that's when they run to church, because they want to be closer to God. To make me a better person, 68% said that's their reason. I think that's pretty encouraging, right? Because it means people are striving more to do good, and they make that connection to being more spiritual, to being closer to God by going to services as a way to helping them achieve that goal, right?
Going to church keeps you in check.
Yeah, it does. in a good frame of mind, too. All right, next one. I find the sermons valuable. All the preachers, you better listen to this, 59% of the people said they find the sermons very valuable.
Okay, so that's still a pretty high number.
That's pretty high number.
So they put a lot of weight on what the priest or the pastor
says.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or the deacon.
Or the deacon, that's right, Deacon Dom. Which means, you know, priests and clergy out there, prepare.
Preaching is very important.
It's very important to people. They're paying attention to what you're saying, even though, you know, there's always the people, you know, who are sitting in the pews reading the bulletin, which makes me crazy.
Yeah, it reminds me of a couple, when you was I with you? Oh, no, you were up with me in Michigan, and we were in Mass, and the lady was reading the bulletin.
The bulletin.
I wanted to lean over. Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to lean over and go, can I have that, please?
Wasn't it during the consecration, too?
Yes, she was still reading the bulletin during the consecration. I would say, excuse me, you could read that at home, you know, over your coffee.
Right.
I mean, really. But, you know, they do value, what this is saying is they still find the sermons valuable. So preachers out there, your sermons should be well prepared and good, because people are listening. To please my family, spouse, or partner.
Wow, this number really surprised me. Shocked me. It was so low.
16%. Yeah. 16%. But how many people would go to church because their mother was telling them, you should be going to church?
Right.
So moms, that doesn't affect most of the people. They don't care.
And look at this last figure. That's the highest in terms of the percentages.
So my children will grow up with a moral foundation. 69% cited that as a reason, which means, you know, and I can think about this, you know, personally, because I was away from the church, and even when my children were first born, I made sure they got baptized, but I let my mother-in-law take them to church.
You were making the sauce. That was your excuse.
I was making the sauce. I was every Sunday. Ma, here, you take them. I'll make the sauce. I'll make the sauce. The meatballs. But when I came back to the church, suddenly their religious education to me became so important, because I felt so guilty about, well, maybe I wasn't doing such a crackerjack job here. And I focused so intently on their religious upbringing, so much so within 2 years of when I came back to the church, actually, about 2 years, I transferred them from public school into Catholic school. because I felt they had to have a better foundation. And I continued that. I mean, I went back to work as a public school teacher so I could afford Catholic school. And then I later sent them on to Catholic high school because I suddenly appreciated my faith more, and I took it serious. And so this year, so that my children would grow up with a moral foundation, 69%, that speaks to me because that's exactly what happened, was my experience.
It's a very generous reason. A lot of people fall away from their faith when they go to college or when they are inserted into the workforce, and there's so much pressure, so much anti-clericalism, but then when they get married and have their children, they think twice about, well, in what kind of environment do we want to bring up our children?
Yeah.
We better keep it clean and come back to it.
And you know, this whole foundation question, I'm finding now with the millennial generation that's married, it's scary because, like, I thank the Lord every single day. Thank you, Jesus, that all 4 of my grandchildren have been baptized, and my daughters are bringing them up in the faith. And I just say, praise Lord, thank you. And I pray all the time, keep it that way, Lord, please keep it that way. But recently I was having a conversation with some dear friends of mine who this family is very devout, very religious, and they have a lot of children. They have 7 children. They're all but 1 are married. And she said to me, none of my grandchildren have yet to be baptized.
Wow. Wow.
And it's breaking because they don't practice their faith. All of them have gone away from the church. They don't practice their faith. And she said, Janet, my oldest daughter, my granddaughter's in high school now.
Wow.
None of them baptized.
Wow.
And so it breaks her heart. And I was kidding around with it. I said, well, what I think I would do is do what happened to in my husband's family. His cousin was raised, the mother was Jewish, his uncle, of course, is Italian. It was just back in the 50s, Teresa, you'll laugh. They took Dennis in a carriage up to the church when Aunt Shirley was off to the beauty parlor, and they had the priest baptize them.
But it's not, you have to have the parents to be valid.
I know, now you do.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, the father was there.
Well,
but I'm just saying, this foundational thing is so important.
Yeah,
it really
we have
is.
it in our family where all of the great-grandchildren, my grandnieces and nephews, all except 2 are baptized. My nephew Michael, who never practiced the faith growing up, my sister fell away. She didn't instill it in her kids. But her other 2 children had their children baptized, but he married a very nice girl, but Protestant, but does not take faith seriously because she really didn't grow up with a strong, even though she has an uncle who was a pastor who did their wedding, she doesn't really have a strong faith, and neither of those kids have been baptized.
Wow.
And my mother and I talk about that all the time.
It's a hurt. It's really a sorrow.
Well, you're worried about them.
Yeah, my friends, she is extremely, extremely worried about her grandchildren. And she says to me, thank Janet, thank God. I said, I thank every day,
So at the end of the day, before we break and come back and wrap up with our resources and whatnot, what do you take from these numbers? And what should our viewers take, do you think, Janet and Elena, from these numbers?
Well, I think what's very important is people are obviously taking the relationship with God very important, even though we think
seriously.
Yeah, they take it very seriously. I mean, when you look at what's going on in the culture, you think people have lost their faith. They've lost this whole concept of God. But according to the statistics here, people who at least go to church once or twice a month, they're on a journey. And their relationship with God is important to them. So my advice to parents, if your children aren't attending church or just go once in a while, encourage them, because the survey is saying they want a relationship with God. So talk about that. Talk more about the relationship with God than about you must be going to church every Sunday.
Right.
I think introducing them to have a relationship with Jesus is going to bring them.
Then everything is going to follow through, which is what I talk about in my book, Beyond Sunday.
And on that same topic, also reach out to those who are not going to church, because they too will have that spiritual desire.
Idea.
Meet them where they are, social media, out in the grocery store, etc.
I interviewed a bishop last year. It was during the March for Life, and it was interesting. And he was on the show with me in D.C. And he said that the first time he ever recommended people pull out their phones and actually use them during Mass is to text. He said, I want you to text someone right now who isn't here with you and you wish were here with you in Mass.
Wow.
He says, then I want you to put your phones away after that. He
right.
says, we're going to break the rules here. I'm going to have you pull out your phone. And so text a friend, text a loved one, text a child. And he said once he started doing that, it became a habit, like people would do that before they came to Mass or on their way. And after that, he saw an increase in people that were coming back to the church, reaching out to someone.
That's right.
We have to take a break. Great discussion. This is flying by very quickly. More on Catholic in name only, and some great resources for you to make sure you stay Catholic in more than just name only when we come back on this episode of The Catholic View. Stay tuned. We're so glad you tuned in to the Catholic View for Women. Continue our discussion on Catholic in name only and some uplifting stats. Maybe it's not all as bad as the culture says. I'm Teresa Tomeo along with Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. JM, I know we have a couple of other questions you want to go over with us from this Pew Forum
again,
report.
you know, I found this survey enlightening because I didn't think it was going to be as bad as we thought, you know, because when you look at the culture out there, you think, oh, mamma mia.
Yeah.
But this, I find it somewhat encouraging. All right, so here's next. They asked respondents who, again, attend religious services once or twice a month or more the following thing. How often do you experience each of the following when you attend religious services, okay? First thing, a sense of God's presence. Now, 51% said always, 29% said often, but not always, and 14% said sometimes. Only 3% said rarely, only 3% said never. I mean, look at this. More than half said they always feel God's presence. And then another 29% said often but not always. Well, that gives you almost 80% of the people
that feel God's presence
when they walk into church. But I have to scratch my head and say, okay, if you feel God's presence, then how can you come in the way you dress sometimes? They don't genuflect, but what's good
they're
is,
there. They're
they're
starting.
there.
Yeah.
They're there,
And
and they truly
they
feel,
might not
because I
know it.
think what happens is when we see the people walk by the tabernacle and don't acknowledge or bow or chit-chat in a church, they figure, oh, they don't even realize they're in the presence of God. But the survey here is saying, no, that's not the case. They do feel the presence of God, so I think that's encouraging. The next thing was a sense of connection to a long-standing tradition. 36% said always, and 24% often, but not always. So again, that's over 50% say it's because of this sense of long-standing tradition. So the long-standing tradition of the Catholic Church,
which is a good thing.
or
I mean,
the
that
Christian
they
Church.
appreciate that history
Yeah.
and their family, and
And right. And then following, a sense of community with people who also share your religion. 41% said always, and 32% said often, but not always. So again,
73%.
73% feel the sense of community. We're all believers together. We're all Catholic. We believe in this. This is our faith. This is our religion. That's important to them. So
That sense of community is very important. It encourages in our faith, and sometimes attending church is more than, which the main, of course, the main is
Right.
to attend Mass or to attend the
Right.
service, but it is sometimes tied to another community service event going on either before the service or after the service that you participate in.
Right.
And your faith, your faith needs to come to life. A good recommendation is to exercise your faith, to help others exercise their faith and feel this sense of community belonging. Draw a triangle on a map or a piece of paper and use that as your map and write the words on each angle: piety, study, and action. Piety is your worship service. Your action is how you're serving the community, and your study is how you're studying the faith more. And that'll help you get even more out of your Sunday worship.
that's a great idea. That's great, Elena. I think also, too, you have a scripture verse for us, too, don't you?
Oh, yes, and it is from Matthew chapter 10, verse 33. It says, "But whoever denies me before people, I too will deny before my Father in heaven." And the way we can look at this is sometimes we are afraid to show our faith in public, and we don't want to share wear our faith on our sleeve. There's nothing wrong with that. Wear your faith on your
literally
sleeve.
on your
Literally.
sleeve.
You do.
Crosses,
and
earrings,
yes,
yeah.
and
T-shirts.
I have my
yeah.
cross right here.
and don't be afraid to express your faith. First of all, it is your First Amendment, right?
Right.
And number two, it opens up the conversation for you to share your faith with somebody else who might be asking you about your very
Right.
blunt. After all, don't we wear our favorite team jersey out on the public square? Well,
Right.
why not wear your faith?
Team
Don't be
Jesus.
ashamed. Don't be
That's
ashamed
right.
to wear a religious T-shirt and open up a conversation. That'll
Right.
strengthen your faith. It'll open up that sense of community belonging for somebody else.
Right.
We only have about 3 minutes left. I did want to pick up some of the notes of our spiritual advisor, Father Frank, as he makes some good points, because the title of the show is Catholic in Name Only.
Right.
The statistics are really encouraging in terms of people going to church
Absolutely.
seriously for various reasons. We don't know in terms of that survey, but we do know with our own experience, and based on the research I've done for this book and others, that there are a lot of people who are making up excuses or making up their own religion.
Right.
And Father Frank says making up one's own rules about the faith is not religion. It is a caricature of religion.
Right.
At the heart of worship is very simple. Is very simply the acknowledgement that one, there is a God, and two, it isn't
Not me.
People who want to do it their way are trying to worship God while taking God out of the equation, which I think is super, super important
Right.
to understand.
Yeah, I Father Frank has said that, in homilies before. There is a God, and it's not me.
It's not
But
you.
usually you get a chuckle out of that
Yeah.
to people, but it's the truth.
Right.
It's the truth.
Right.
Well, anyway, I just want to, Mother Angelica always said, keep those holy
Holy
reminders. And we have
yep.
here, of course, our kitchen Madonna, and she's a great holy reminder to have in your home. And of course, the pot here is to great symbolism to nourish your in body and soul. The broom here is to keep the house clean, but to keep your thoughts also clean. The keys keep the home safe, locked up tight, but also Mary will open the keys to the kingdom and lead us to Jesus. The Kitchen Madonna available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And
And
now,
real quickly, our homework.
homework time.
Wow, this show flew by.
Flew
And
by.
I
Yeah.
have to say this too. This is a marvelous resource written by my dear sister here, Teresa Tomeo. Beyond Sunday, this great book, Becoming a 24/7 Catholic, and it has a workbook,
And
companion
a video
workbook.
series that goes
And a
with
video
it too.
series
An
that goes
8-part
with it.
video series.
This is available also at the EWTN Religious Catalog. Our next thing of homework is, number 2, is to pick an EWTN show that really speaks to your faith. Tune in regularly. Go to EWTN.com/download for the free EWTN app. And I also know at EWTN, Elena, they have what's called On Demand now on the EWTN program. So just go to the website. All the information is there. And then, like you said, Elena, number 3, draw a triangle on paper, piety, study, and action. Write your own actions to keep that triangle standing. And number 4, go to, of course, our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, for more information about our e-letter and about all these resources will be up there, the homework, etc. And finally, like us on Facebook and be in touch with us. We'd like to hear from you. And
Right, and also we can also put, I think, on the website a link to the Pew Forum report.
Yes,
'cause
we
it's
will.
really
This
interesting.
research,
Yeah, and it'll give you some encouragement in terms
yeah, because
that
we
we're
didn't
not
cover
alone.
the whole
Right,
report. There's a
right.
lot more in depth. We just gave you a sampling, so to speak.
Yeah, and always be willing, as I say in my book, to go beyond Sunday and not to be Catholic in name only. Thanks for watching this edition of the Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo for Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. We'll see you next time on the Catholic View. Thanks for watching.